So yes, that's today. Let's move on. This is our agenda. We're going to go over some KPIs. We're going to talk about which KPI is most important to pay attention to, walk through an example of tracking content, learn some simple approaches for upgrading the content, and then, kind of cut it there and talk about moving forward from where we're at in this bootcamp now. So let's talk about KPIs for digital content. That's key performance indicators. And for our purposes, like on our team, we really call them metrics or stats most of the time when we're chatting. So we use those all interchangeably. First of all, where do we get the data to track those stats or metrics or KPIs? So depending on what you want to look for, you're going to find it in different places. A lot of it you'll find in WordPress or whatever content management system you're using. They have similar ways to look at stats. You basically just log in and you can use like the stats that's part of WordPress, or you can find all these different plugins to use, things like heat maps. That's like, it looks like an infrared map and it shows you like how much people click on a page or where they travel on a page. You can also find really useful stats in Google Analytics. You can find them in Google Search Console. Those tools are both courses in and of themselves, but if you do get into content, those are really fun to work with once you get the basic lay of the land, because they give you crazy insights. You can also check out the analytics section in any social media scheduling tool. I mean, even like the customer facing stuff in, the normal stuff in like Instagram, you can see insights about what's going on. So that's good for social media. And you can also use tools like Ahrefs or Moz or these other backlinking and SERP analytics tools. And those tell you more about how your post is ranking online, as opposed to like the traffic and stuff that's occurring inside of your website. So we don't have the scope right now to walk through using all of these, but I want to make sure that you had the list in case you're interested in checking them out and looking at them. So here's some examples of key performance indicators that you might look for. So you can just browse this list visually right now and just let me know if there's something on here that you'd like me to go into more. You can pop that in the chat. But otherwise, I'll just leave this list with you for your future reference. So let me know if you've got any questions about these. Basically, all of these KPIs will tell you something different about your content or about your audience. So it's not about tracking all of these things religiously, because that's too much work and it's not often very useful. You remember those vanity metrics that we talked about? Yeah, all of these KPIs can very quickly turn into vanity metrics if you are tracking it simply for the sake of tracking it. So you've got to be conscientious of why you're looking at it. It's the purpose. Alyssa's asking, what are the most, that's the question. The question is, what are the ones to concentrate on most or to shoot for when marketing a local business? That's a really interesting question. I will get to that. I have to say that there's none of them stand out to me as being the most important one to look at, and I will explain why. And that's a really interesting problem that a lot of people have, like millions of people have. So that's definitely something worth discussing. If anybody at the end of this wants to jump on and like start chatting about this, that would be really interesting. This is why I'm hesitant to answer that question. In full disclosure, we do track and analyze all of these things for our content, but we try to be really careful about how much we focus on these metrics versus how much we're focusing on our overall goals. So using KPIs well, knowing what's important, what matters, what to focus on, is all about knowing your content goals. Like, what is the objective of that piece of content and how that relates back to your business. So which of these KPIs is most important? I'm going to go with none of them. and I will show you why. Here is an example of a post that's performing really well. It's on the Ecom Manager website that we run. And according to a couple KPIs on here, it is doing great. First of all, it's just a good keyword. Okay, the post targets a really good keyword. It's got a decent volume, a low keyword difficulty, and a high click-through rate. So this already tells me this is a great topic to have on our blog. It's live, and it's currently ranking in the 3rd position on SERP. That's great. Top of the first page in Google. And it brings about 15 to 30 visitors a day. So it's steady flow, and it's steadily growing in traffic each week, which makes me happy because it means we don't have to upgrade it. We don't have to do much about it. It's just doing its job. This is wonderful. Here it is. There it is, the prized place. It's on the first page of Google. That's excellent. Let's take a peek at the blog post. Title is, How to Solve PayPal Gateway Has Rejected Request. Security header is not valid, and a number and a security error. Really enrapturing, right? If you're wondering what this post is about or who this is for, you're not alone. I don't even know. I do not know. We inherited this post as part of buying a bunch of domains for this website. But yeah, it doesn't really match my goals because my goal right now on the Ecom Manager is to get signups for my newsletter. So I don't know how anybody searching for this query, it ranks for, I think security header is not valid. I don't know how anybody searching for that would make this mental jump that, oh, actually, no, I don't want to solve my header security problem. I want to get on the Ecom Manager newsletter list. I mean, would you? So this type of post shows us that we can't really depend on one particular KPI to tell us if our content is working for us, like if it's actually delivering return on investment. Because on paper, this post is great, but for my goals, it does nothing. I should take it down. So it brings us back to this main point. And before you start tracking any KPIs, you've got to keep this in mind all the time. That good content's about action, and the action has to be good for our business in some way. Metrics can help you see if it's headed in the right direction, but they're not everything. So just because you rank high in search engines doesn't mean you're attracting the right kind of customer to your site. And just because your post is getting views, even from the right kind of customer, it doesn't mean you're actually acquiring leads from it. So in general, the main thing to remember is that exposure, whether it's through views or opens or minutes watched or shares, is not a viable strategy. It's not a business strategy. It's not the point. It's not the business objective. So I know this is really obvious, and I don't mean to be beating a dead horse, but exposure is so tempting to measure. It's so easy to see how much exposure your content gets. You can look at the stats, like most of the stats are about exposure, but you have to do a lot more digging to actually figure out if it's moving your business objectives forward. And at this point, you might say, "Oh, Sarah, I'm going to work as a copywriter, so I don't need to think about this stuff. I'm just going to write what they tell me." And sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it's not. If you're working for a digital marketing agency who specializes in this, and they're giving you some really good briefs made by a content strategy team, then you're all right. I would say learn from them, write with them, just write what they tell you. But if you are going to make content for your own stuff, or for a family friend, or for an individual business owner, remember, you pretty much are their content strategy. So even if you're brought on as a just a writer, or just a content creator, you got to keep in mind that writing is really not about grammar. It's about quality of thought. And so you are their content strategy. There's a lot of businesses who really, really struggle with this core concept of going for exposure, but then realizing that exposure doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't actually get them real results. So it's really important that as content creators in any part of this content creation cycle, that we champion these core facts of digital content. It will make your content successful if you can keep this in mind, and it'll make you a way more valuable asset to your clients or whatever team you're working for. So really important to keep in mind. Basically what I would say is watch the bottom line. So from the very start, try to open up a discussion about revenue, lead acquisition, orders, sales, like whatever keeps the company afloat. Talk about that bottom line and how the content is supposed to impact it. This is really a high-level business discussion. It needs to happen like right away, like even before marketing budget is set aside. So often you get kind of pulled into scenarios where people haven't had this discussion yet. It's kind of awkward. It's awkward for people to talk about money and revenue, or maybe they're embarrassed about how their orders have gone down, and it's touchy. But it's important to open it up because of this situation here, that just going for exposure isn't a viable strategy. We need to be going for exposure that leads to bottom line impacts. So once you draw that line, people are usually more comfortable chatting about revenue and stuff like that. So if content is supposed to help get people on your newsletter, then visitors is a good KPI, like how many people come to your post. That's good. Click-through rate is even a better KPI. It's telling you how many people are actually clicking through and signing up to your newsletter. So in that case, I wouldn't really be concerned with likes or shares or anything else. I would just be focused on that bottom line. Like for me right now on Ecom Manager, signups matters the most. So I want to make sure that I'm really just looking at signups. Everything else is secondary. So once you're clear on that goal, it's way easier to figure out what KPIs really matter, because the KPI is as close to the goal as possible, And the bottom line doesn't always have to be transactional. I want to make a comment on this. It doesn't have to be about money or sales at all. Sometimes the most impactful thing that you can do with content is just have a real impact on people's lives. So if that's the case, a good KPI might be how many 5-star reviews you're getting. I think that for the example of the In Your Hands organization that distributes, offers access to healthcare, a good example of a bottom line thing to track is how many people have you provided access for. It's really drawing that bottom line goal and figuring out how your content is strategically helping you get there and tracking whether or not that is occurring with your content. So let's just see what this looks like in a real example, because I think it gets kind of confusing. Like, okay, what do you mean? I'm going to track some content right now. I'm going to track it for a very specific reason. I'm going to try to figure out if it has achieved my goal. If it hasn't, I'm also going to track it to find different indicators that tell me where I should be upgrading it in order to reach that goal. And there's some good news in the tracking department. You don't actually have to really track your content. It's not like a task that you have to do every day. As long as you have a couple of tools set up, you'll always have instant access to all the data that you need. So we've mentioned before, it's really not about having it, it's about knowing what to focus on. So you've got all this information about what your content is doing and all of these tools. Should you leave your content alone? Should you pay somebody to promote it? Should you delete it? Should you upgrade it? Should you tweak it? Well, here's an example of me looking at something to see how it's doing. I'm just going to look at my WordPress stats for the productmanager.com. It's the site we run that's about product management. So I'm looking in WordPress and I see this weekly traffic, and all of a sudden it's like, boom. So I know that something is going on. So I just click into it and look at it. So when I look at the top posts and pages on my site, I see this one blog post that has a ton of views. And right now, this is just the stats in WordPress. So it's really accessible. It's a basic tool, nothing fancy. So I'm going to check out that top performing blog post. And I'm like, oh, that's great. This is the post I wrote with the goal of getting some newsletter signups. So the keyword here I was going for is product management blogs. And I figured if people are interested in a list of product management blogs, they'd probably be interested in mine. So I think this is a great place for me to kind of shout out a little bit about our product management blog. So I know that this post, for some reason, is looking promising. Traffic's not everything, but it is an indicator that something's going on. So let's see what's going on with traffic. Back in WordPress, I see some really big spikes. I just published this piece of content. It was getting 0, 0, 0, 0 across the board. And then all of a sudden on April 20th, it got a bunch of traffic. And then on April 21st, a bunch more. So I wonder if you're thinking about the 2 ways that content is discovered, you're probably able to tell what's going on with this piece. If you have any guesses, please weigh in the chat. What do you think is happening here with this post? Alyssa says, influencer? Yeah, it probably is. Let's look and see. I'm going to look at referrers. Referrers is the links on the web that point to this post. So I can see where people are coming from. And right at the top of referrers, I see that LinkedIn is my top referrer, which is weird because LinkedIn is not a very good search engine. So I know that that's not organic traffic. So I'm going to click on those LinkedIn links and I find a couple of interesting things. I've also clicked on, and go back, there's a Twitter. Twitter is a big source up there. Twitter's got like 300 people. So I've also clicked into Twitter and looked around. And what I found is that this guy named Sachin Rekhi has shared my stuff on his LinkedIn and on his Twitter, and it's gotten a bunch of engagement. People are reacting to it like nuts. There's a bazillion comments on it. People are retweeting, they're liking it. So I'm pretty sure that what happened is an influencer shared my post and it just kind of blew up because all of his followers were really happy about it. Why did he share my post? It's because I mentioned him in my article. So I went back to my article and I see that what we did is we included his project management blog or product management blog, and we quoted him. And during the process of creating this article, we actually reached out and we asked him if he wanted to contribute a quote because he was being featured. So this is a great way to build a relationship in advance. It works like magic. It also makes you feel good. You connect with other people in your industry. It's just a really nice way to develop content and to develop those relationships as part of developing that content. And for us, this had a nice positive effect. It looks like we've, built a little bit of, social rapport, and it worked out. But I want to ask you, did my blog post achieve my goal? It's a good question. I don't think we're looking at the right KPIs yet. I'm going to look now in WordPress for clicks to the product manager's subscribe page. That's how people sign up for my newsletter, and that's my goal. No matter what else I did with this post, my goal on the product manager is to get signups for our newsletter. And so I need to look and see, is anybody clicking onto that subscribe link on that post? Now, across my site, I can see that pretty much no one is clicking on that link. They're clicking on a bunch of like the blog, the other blogs that are listed in that post, because it's clearly something that they're interested in, but they're definitely not clicking my subscribe link. I can see that. So why are they not clicking subscribe? Okay, I'm going to look at my post. I can see at least 2 ways that I can improve this. Here's a little screenshot of what's going on at the very bottom of my post. I can see 2 ways to improve it. You can probably see more. Share them in the chat. For one, I could change my heading in this section to say something that clearly tells people I have a newsletter to sign up for, like get more insight in our newsletter or sign up for product manager news. I should also update the hyperlinked text in the orange box. The whole action should be linked, not just the words the product manager. Because when you read, do you find yourself when you read online, you like jump from hyperlink to hyperlink, like that text just pops out at you. And so it's really important that the text on the link, the whole thing is linked so that people can understand that by clicking on that, that's the action that would occur. So someone skimming the page would be way more likely to sign up if they knew that that's what that link did. I could also add this section towards the top. I could add an image, maybe like show a newsletter image or an icon that's like sign up for the newsletter, and it like shows people the pages of the newsletter, kind of like a thing, you know. I could also put it in like a sidebar widget so it pops out a bit more. Yeah. I'm not sure what Alyssa's saying. The sign up is a bit, buried. I thought you said blurred. Yeah, it is. It's buried. It's buried at the bottom of the post, and that's probably my big problem. So I need to find ways to make this more visible, because it's clearly the post is doing all right. You know, people are enjoying it. Eric's saying it'd be interesting to see whether people spent time on the page or where they went. Did they just click the link, or did they get an idea and move on quickly? Yeah, that's something that we can generally use Google Analytics for if you want to analyze on-page behavior. Google Analytics can show you things, those KPIs like dwell time, how much time they spend on your page, exit rate, how many people is that page the very last thing they see before they leave your site. It's a good. Sometimes you find that, you know, I think this page is a big exit page, because what people do is they're like, I want to look at product management blogs. They come to my post, they see a couple, and they click off, right? So this has probably a very high exit rate, and that's something I would need to fix. But I'd probably check it out in Google Analytics and just see what's going on, so I can tell. I'd just make a note like exit rate is this percentage, so that in a month when I come back, I can see if I've improved it or not. So you can't be totally sure why something happened, even when you're using stats to figure it out. But you can make good guesses. Your content won't always hit the mark. There's a lot of learning involved to making great content. So you can think of your content more as like an asset that can appreciate in value. You've invested a lot into it. So if you continue to think strategically about it, just come back and analyze it from an outside perspective, that's usually enough to move you towards where you need to be. And enough is enough in, you know, when you're upgrading content. So how do you do it? Simple upgrade approach. I'm just going to walk through. If you're a freelance copywriter, you won't really ever have to think about it unless you're commissioned to specifically do a bunch of upgrades on existing content, and you might be. So here's a simple approach to guide you and just orient you before you get started. I know this doesn't seem like a captivating topic, but there's tons of reasons to upgrade your content instead of making new stuff. So it's very common to be like, I just need new content. It's like the modus operandi for content marketing efforts. It's like, the stuff you made didn't work. Make something different. Make more. Make it better. Make it faster. It's just like, there's so much new stuff going out. We forget that we have some really valuable stuff already sitting on our website, and we can just revisit it, rework it, recycle it. And there's some really good reasons to do that. Number one, existing content is already indexed. It has seniority, and Google likes the fact that your website has been around for a long time. So if you can keep that content upgraded and healthy on your site, it's already indexed and it sends good signals to Google. It also sends signals to Google that you're maintaining that content, which earns you those brownie points. Google likes to see, Google can track like how regularly a page is updated. So seeing those regular updates just tells Google that this is relevant, it's authoritative, it's maintained. So that's really good. Recycling content, or sorry, upgrading content is often easier than making it fresh because you've already done a lot of that strategic figuring out in the beginning. It's often cheaper than making new content. Unlike new content, existing content gives you insight into behavior because you already have something live that you can track and you have stats for. And in upgrading content, you discover other ways to recycle stuff. So I always find ways when I'm reading something, I say, oh, you know, I could have a section in here that's like product management versus project management. Like, oh, that could be a good infographic. So if I develop the text for that, I could make it into a graphic, and then that's something to share on social. So you just get into this habit of finding ways to recycle and be really efficient with your time and your creative energy. You also learn. You learn something from making new content, but you learn something different from upgrading what you've already done. And I would argue that you learn more valuable lessons when you're forced to look back at what you've made and where maybe your mistakes are, so that you know how to be more efficient, more strategic in the future. It's really important. So I just want to give a pause here for any thoughts or comments. Feel free to come on, feel free to share your video, happy to chat. Oh, sorry, I was just reading a comment from Eric. That was from before. All right, I'm just going to invite you all to share your thoughts and comments as we move on, and then I'll keep going. How to approach a content upgrade. My general advice is this: give it a month, because you need time to get stats and get an accurate capture of data. Then look at the stats. Just check. It's like a quick checkup. Is it getting traffic? Was there a day that had more traffic than others? Like, what's going on there? Is it ranking? What keyword is it ranking for? You can use Ahrefs to do that. That one, it's a paid tool, but I'm sure there's free tools out there. You can check to see what percentage of people are clicking through. I use Google Analytics. You can also do a really basic check on WordPress stats for that. You can also look into what type of people have shared it. So I could look into the guy, Sachin, and kind of figure out what's his job, where's his tribe, what are they interested in. That's customer insight. That's really useful for me because it's more like market research. I'd also look and see what people are saying about it, because sometimes people give you really good ideas. They'll be like, you know, this is useful, but it doesn't hit the mark. It doesn't cover this. And you're like, oh, that's a good idea. I'll upgrade it. I'll add that. So people give you good ideas. And just make some notes. Make some notes about interesting stats and investigate why they happened, investigate what's going on, and just write it down somewhere so that you can keep track of that and have that log over time. I've already done a lot of these steps, you know, in the example. So I'm going to say that we gave it a month. We looked at the stats. We made some notes. We looked into it. Now I'm just going to talk more about points 4, 5, and 6, about revisiting the goals and the purpose, and then using that to make improvements and implement that improvement that you guess is best. I would say just to try one so that you can measure. If you try a bunch of things, you're not really sure what worked. So this is like a core concept of testing. So just try to change one thing so you can isolate that variable. So I will say that a lot of upgrading content is making your best guess. It's using data to make your best guess. So it's not about knowing for certain what works or what's most important. It's really more about being open to what the data is telling you on a case-by-case basis, and then having the agility to come at that from whatever perspective you need in order to understand it better. I think this is a really useful tool for getting that perspective. I would say when you're revisiting the goals and purpose in step 4, that you just place yourself on these bubbles from before. So I would say, where is my content right now? How is it performing right now? I would say that my post for the product manager is definitely in the area of content people want. Clearly, my post about blogs is getting shared and like even celebrated on social media. They're proud to share. They're happy to congratulate people for being featured on it. So based on the clicks, I can see that they're finding it useful. They're, clicking through to these blogs that they're interested in. So it's clearly content people want. I think it's serving its purpose. How about the purple bubble? Will it perform well in search? I checked Ahrefs, but it's still too early to tell. I'm going to need to wait like a month before I make any sweeping conclusions about if it's performing in search. But right now, I do know for sure that it's not accomplishing my goal. What I want to tell them, I want to tell them I am a product management blog. Like, sign up for me. This is why I am worth subscribing to. So I know that I can plan those upgrades that we talked about, such as those ideas that we threw around, so I can bring that arrow closer to the center of those circles, because that's where it needs to be. Another thing you can do is to revisit this should I make it test. So you might find that you thought one of those boxes didn't really matter, or maybe you checked it off, but you didn't actually do it, didn't actually work. Maybe, the top point. Maybe you thought, yeah, people need this. And then you realize, actually, maybe not. Maybe I have to do some research. I don't know if people need this exact thing. At what point you would go back and, tweak your title, do some keyword research and figure out, okay, if they don't need this, can I tweak it a little bit? And maybe they need that. So it's all about like revisiting these things that you thought were true about your content and just kind of sanity checking yourself and being like, where did it go wrong? For example, I might realize people are more interested in product management websites, and they're not really looking for blogs. And I would figure that out by looking at a keyword tool. So what I can do when I find that out is I can tweak the words in the title to better reflect that search query and appeal to the greater majority of people that are looking for product management websites. So as long as it's still truthful and relevant, I think it's a good fix to make. And I would say blog and website is like practically synonymous. So I think that's an easy, quick fix, and it could make a big difference on whether or not people find my post enticing in search engines. So I would manage that upgrade with some real notes somewhere. I say that because it's easy to get lost. Content is definitely an art. It's not a science. And so when you're figuring it out, it's good to follow, make a breadcrumb trail, and make those notes. It's your experiment. Nobody knows your content or your business better than you do. So no one can figure it out better than you can. So you are the authority on this. You really need to have those notes for yourself. I would say the most important thing in your notes is the date. Is the date that you upgraded it, the date that you noticed it, something like that. So you can tell when you've made those changes after that point if they've made an impact. So the dates really matter. I like to manage my upgrades on the content plan. I'll just put them in a column like upgraded on this day. I make notes. Sometimes I'll also put them in the Trello cards. If I'm planning a larger, something more complicated that needs more notes, I'll put them in the Trello card, keep them in a Word document. It's really up to you. So before we move forward and talk about where we can go from here, I just wanted to open it up for questions. If you have any questions about upgrading or tracking content, let me know. But if you don't have any questions, I'm just going to keep rolling because I want to move on and I want to talk about where to go from here. Like you did it. You joined us on this big experimental adventure. You dove into this nitty-gritty world of actually making content, which is quite a grind. It's hard work. There's lots of uncertainty. And so now what? How to move forward? So I think we can shift our vision to what's going to come next for everybody. First of all, no matter what you do, take advantage of these resources. So please use, abuse, and improve these for your own use. You've got the content plan, you've got that proofing checklist, the digital tools checklist, which is that collection of, standard, inexpensive tools. I think they're the easiest ones to use to get started. You've got the briefing template. This bad boy is a really valuable resource. Use it to map your ideas, to collaborate with others about a piece of content before it gets written, to add not so good ideas and then figure out that they're actually not that good and nip them in the bud before you invest a bunch of energy into them. I think that this is really valuable because when for me at least, when I start focusing on the brief and actually structuring it, that's when I realize where the holes in my ideas are. That's when I realize I need to go back to the drawing board and refine them. So it can be a big time and money saver down the road. What can you do with these? Well, how you use them will really depend on you. You can use them to help you build your business. You can start a side hustle in content. You can get deeper into learning SEO and playing with that on your website, freelancing. If you want to get your hands dirty and start just learning on the job and working in content, my advice is to go for it. Okay, there's a lot of gig work out there and there's plenty of content work. So we looked on Upwork, but you can also check out guru.com. Pro Blogger Jobs is another one. I'd also advise you to reach out to friends and family because you never know. Everybody's got some web-based business that they could use a little content for. So if you want practice, the opportunities are out there. I would say if you want to get work and you're trying to figure out how much to charge, there's really 3 ways freelancers get paid with content. And you'll see a pay per article, pay per hour, and pay per word. This goes for like graphic designers too. It would be pay per piece or pay per hour. But I think what I'm about to say is relevant for freelance writers. It's also relevant for business owners. Like if you're looking at hiring a content person, pay per article is really easy. The boundaries are clean and clear, and employers are more willing to take a risk on a new person with a pay per article rate. So as a newbie, getting paid per article usually means that there's less pressure and there's more freedom to learn when you're starting out. So you don't have as much oversight on like how you're doing it. I'd honestly recommend going with a per article arrangement for a bit until you really feel that you have a grasp on what you're doing. And you will make way less money in the beginning. And then as you get better at it, you will, you'll perfect your own process and you'll make more. I think at that point, if you love the gig, keep it, obviously. But at that point, once you feel that you've learned enough to really feel solid, then switch into looking for hourly work. Generally, employers who pay hourly have a bit more of a budget. It's a bit, looser. They're generally more open to having you play a more strategic role, going that extra mile, making something that's really cool and has a bigger impact. But hourly pay does mean that you have to be more conscientious of your time. You have to, I think, be better at estimating your time, which is why I think it's important to get your feet wet with pay per article work, because then you realize like how much time you take to make stuff. You need that practice to learn for estimating your time. And you should also be tracking your time with a tool. I like to use Toggle. It's free. It's super easy. You just like press go and press stop when you're working. It's really easy. Alyssa's asking, the article that she's starting is paid per article, but the pay looks higher than I expected. What do I think is the going rate per article? That's a really good question. Do you know, is it like SEO or is it content writing? They'll generally distinguish between those two things. It's for their newsletter. Are you writing the email of their newsletter? Like the copy that goes inside of their newsletter, or are you writing an article that lives on their blog and then they're going to advertise it or promote it in the newsletter? It really depends, and sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes you're like, I don't know. Okay, it's a blog post. Going rate per article is really challenging. When I first started, I remember I took on a gig that I swear was like euros, but it was like 10 euros an article. But they required no research. It was basically like you had a bunch of pictures of home renovations, and you wrote about that, that house and its home renovations, and just kind of told that story and described them. So it required like no research whatsoever. And that was 10 euros. What is that? Like, I don't know, 15 Canadian, it's like $12 US. I don't know. But that was, I would say, very low. I was definitely on the low end because it required like zero brain power. It was a good way for me to get my feet wet and like learn my tools and learn my process. I know people who make like hundreds of dollars per article, if not thousands, especially when you're a journalist and you have relationships with larger outlets like Forbes.com. You could make 2,000 or 3,000 from a large, long form, well done article. So there's your range. Generally like an SEO content person who is living in North America would be making around a salary of around 40,000 to 70,000. And so if you're going to calculate your hourly based off of that, if you're going to work full time, you're going to want to be making like 50 or 60 bucks an hour. But you've got to kind of work up to that. So it really depends. It's a hard question to answer. And a lot of the times it's not about negotiating that pay with the client. It's about simply filtering for clients that are willing to pay more, because you'll find in content that if the business owner is looking at employing people from different spots overseas, that they can get content made for very, very cheap. And so you just have to know what you're competing against. If it is more of a content mill style, it's like kind of what I was doing in the beginning, where they just need words on a page, they just need you to churn it out. That pay grade is going to be super low. It's going to be like 10 bucks, 15 bucks, 25 bucks an article. But if you find a business that wants to treat you more like a strategic partner, and they're doing less frequent content production, but a little higher quality, you might be looking at something more like 200 bucks an article. So really, really depends. The most important thing is that you're happy with it and that you can see this being sustainable. I think that what we tend to do is underestimate ourselves. I would say that my super special formula for this is estimate the value that you bring, not a newbie. Estimate the value you bring as a newbie and then double it. Just straight up, like times it by 2. Because I think that a lot of creatives undervalue and undercharge because we have trouble articulating the business value. We're not close enough to those business discussions. So we have trouble articulating that value of what you're doing. So I think general rule of thumb, if someone's offering a ridiculously low pay that you can't earn a living on, skip it. There's plenty of people out there who will offer a livable, wonderful pay that makes you happy. Because I freelanced for years as a writer, and I took more of the piecemeal stuff in the beginning. I think I was really underpaid, but also underskilled, so kind of made sense. So my advice is basically just, if it feels too low to earn a sustainable living, like if it's a salary you wouldn't be happy to still be earning in 2 years, just skip it. Keep looking for something that really fits your financial goals, because there's plenty of opportunities out there. I'm just looking at some comments here. Sarah says that she's writing content for an email newsletter, and it does require research and gifts. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you'll see that there's just so much different kind of content you can write. If right now, like knowing in my business, we have a newsletter. If I was going to pay somebody to write it, I'd probably pay them $50. Nah, would I? Maybe 40. It doesn't take very much time for us to write our newsletters, though, which is why I say that. Our newsletters are more of like a summary of what we've published. So all it takes is just looking at what we've published and like arranging it nicely and presenting it in a nice way. Whereas other newsletters are more like, it's like news. You have to research it and like make a story. So then that would be worth more because it requires more research. Alyssa says she's working on an article on Women's Health Month. It requires a good amount of research and it pays in the hundreds. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. Yeah. We in our business, we work with freelancers who are more in the content mill range, working on different types of projects. And then we also work with freelancers who are very skilled, qualified SEO professionals. So they really get the nitty gritty of like the finer points of structuring a search engine optimized article. That's a really valuable skill, and we pay those people a lot more. So yeah, it really depends. Happy to chat about that more too on like a case by case basis because it is so varied. But I think that in general, if you're prepared to learn, then you are prepared to work in digital content. It's like these are just weird times. Adaptability is important, and so is trusting your gut. So right now we're just all soul searching, and we're drawing in, we're paring down, we're learning more about what really matters to us. So if you're prepared to be doing that learning and constantly learning on the job and gut checking yourself, then I think you're prepared to work in digital. And on that note, if you want some guidance along the way, you don't have to do this learning alone. We're extending this to anybody who wants it. It's this optional 1-month mentorship. So if you're interested, how we'll run it is you'll be matched with somebody from our indie media team, and you'll have informal one-on-one check-ins and guidance, and we can help with things like working in content-related roles. We can double check, like, do you think I'm being paid the right amount? Like, we can review some drafts. We can look over content plans. We can refine topics and ideas. I know a couple of you have like interesting side projects. If you'd like feedback on those, we're happy to do it. Kind of similar to what we did in class. So hopefully that's valuable. If anybody wants that, I'll give you instructions for following up on that. I'm sure a lot of you realize that it can be just hard to find answers. It's hard to put words on a page. It's hard to think from an audience's perspective. So much more. Making great content is a labor of love. And I want to tell you, I am there with you. Okay, we get it. The uncertainty, the frustration, the not knowing, the not getting the tools, the data, like we get it. Please do not feel that you need to be official or accomplished in any way to take advantage of the mentorship. It's, I think imposter syndrome is a real blocker for a lot of us. So please just open yourselves up. We all have something to learn, all have something to give, and we're at where we're at. So please just come as you are with all your real hangups and your uncertainties, and we're going to help you move forward with that. There's also a survey at the end of this session, so I'd be so grateful if you could fill it out. I'm going to copy and paste the link right here. I'm also going to email it out after. Please be honest. It was really a big experiment, this whole thing. So whether you liked it or you really hated it, please share your feedback. We need that insight either way. And after you fill out that survey, for anybody who's interested, please get in touch with me. Send me a note, send me an email, Mighty Networks, just whatever you like as soon as possible. And just tell me if you want to join in on mentorship so we can get you hooked up and kind of get schedules worked out and figure out what that looks like for you. So we've got a few minutes here, and I'll leave this open for thoughts and comments and questions, ideas. I'll be keeping the resources, like all the tools and downloads and stuff. Oh, Elena says the link didn't work. I'll look into it. I'll be keeping the resources up on Mighty Networks over the weekend at the very least. So download what you need. I'm going to leave that open for a bit, but eventually we will close it down. So make sure you just go in there and download all the stuff that you want. I'm going to look at this link on Typeform. What was the error for the Typeform? Maybe that it's just like unpublished or something. Could you let me know what it
Yeah,
said?
I just published it, Sarah.
Exists.
Let's try.
Okay. I bet it's just unpublished. Let me click publish on this thing real quick.
There you go. Let's try this.
Media Club. Retro. I bet it just needs to be published. Oh.
Okay, yeah, it's working.
Is anybody else having trouble with it? Create. Oh, it worked. Melissa says it worked. I'm going to double check really quick right now. Make your changes visible to the world. I think it's working. Is it? Oh, Ben just fixed it. Ben, just always in the background, just doing the thing that you do. Oh, and yes, Elena, I'm going to email. I'll send an email out, just like a big wrap-up email so that everybody has everything. But if you feel like sending me a note and being like, yes, sign me up, like, please just send me a note and I'll jot your name down so that we know to reach out and arrange that for you. Hi, Ben. How was recording the podcast? You're on mute.
Oh, no, the podcast is coming up. That was office hour.
Yeah, yes. We can't hear you, but we can see. I can't hear you.
Can anyone else hear me?
Are you going to send everybody off?
Oh, Sarah,
okay, well, I'll
is you.
Be quiet then.
That's funny. We can have a one-way conversation. This isn't going to work very well.
This big marker.
Guys, well, I'm glad that you can hear me. I can say whatever I want about Sarah and she'll never know. No, guys, I just wanted to drop in and say hi and bye. And thanks for being part of this little experiment that we did. It's been fun creating the course, running the course, and I hope you guys have all found it useful. I'll be honest, we had a lot of drop-off, and which was a bit disheartening for us in terms of the number of people that signed up and the number of people who are still still on the course. So we'd love your feedback and to find out how we can do it better and improve this. But really, the reason why we wanted to do it was to help people find work. And I really hope that all of you are able to find some work in the midst of all the craziness that's going on. And hopefully this has given you some hope and exposure into the world that we're in. And I think we're really excited about it because we've been able to turn it into a business for ourselves. And we just wanted to share some of that with you. So I hope that has been useful. And although it might be tough the last couple of weeks, I just want to say thank you for coming along for the ride with us. And Sarah's great. Can you hear me yet, Sarah? No, she still can't. Amazing.
Should I wave? I don't know what happened. Yeah, whoops. I signed in as Ben.
This happens all the time. Everyone pretends to be me, but normally it's okay. But yes, any questions?
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. I imagine that Ben just said a very nice message, so I'm going to say bye.
Cool beans. Well, thank you all. And catch you later. Just enjoying that.